Good afternoon. We're getting ready to get started. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Makerspace Projects for School, Public, and Academic Libraries. I'm Liz Bowie, Content Manager at Demco, and I'll be moderating today's session. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through some housekeeping details, and then I'll introduce our speakers and they can start today's presentation. On your screens, you should see a chat box on the right-hand side. If you have a question, would like to respond to one of the presenters' questions, or are having technical difficulties, please use the chat box to communicate with us. If we don't get to your question during the session, we'll be posting questions and answers along with the recorded webcast, presentation slides, and resources after the event. You will receive an email notification in about a week letting you know when everything is available. You'll also notice our presenters' contact information as well as mine. Please feel free to contact us directly with specific questions that haven't been answered in the follow-up resources. We are also using Twitter today with the hashtag DemcoIdeas. You should be able to see this hashtag on the side of your screen in the chat box. We are monitoring that feed as well for questions and comments. While I'm doing introductions, we're going to pop up a poll question on your screen to help us better understand today's audience. Our question today is, do you currently have a makerspace in your library? Please take a moment to look at the options and let us know. I believe that's all the housekeeping, so let's get started with the program. As I mentioned, I'm Liz Bowie, Content Manager at Demco, and I'll be moderating today's session. I'm very excited to introduce you to our speakers, Colleen Graves and Erin Graves. Colleen Graves is a teacher librarian at Ryan High School in Texas and is an expert in learning commons transformations, makerspaces, and technology education. She brings a passionate artistic energy to the school library world and blogs about makerspaces and libraries at colleengraves.org. Colleen was awarded the School Library Journal School Librarian of the Year co-finalist award in 2014 and was named a Library Journal Mover and Shaker in 2016. Erin Graves has 18 years of experience in education and is currently a teacher librarian at the Denton High School Library in Texas. He is a self-proclaimed mashup of robot geek, book lover, and tech wizard. He is also an active speaker and presenter on libraries, makerspaces, and research skills. Along with their other projects, Erin and Colleen's most recent collaboration is the Big Book of Makerspace Projects, inspiring makers to experiment, create, and learn, which is set to be released on October 21st. So before I turn this over to our presenters, I just want to show you our poll results. It looks like about half of you have an established makerspace already, and about a quarter of you are looking to create a space, and about another quarter of you are already running some pop-up maker activities. So whatever stage of planning you're in, I hope that by the end of this session you'll walk away with some fantastic ideas that you can start implementing in your school or library. Well, it looks like we're ready to begin today's session. Colleen and Erin, you can get started whenever you're ready.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you guys doing? So I'm Colleen Graves, and like Liz said, I work at Ryan High School. This is my second year there. Before that, I was in Louisville ISD at Lamar Middle School, where I also ran a makerspace. So I've transformed two traditional libraries that were pretty quiet spaces into bustling, active makerspaces.
And I'm Erin Graves. I work at Denton High School. This is my second year at that school. We're in the process of expanding our makerspace. Last year was kind of a pop-up makerspace, and we're moving to a designated area and working on getting materials and more things to help our makerspace grow.
So since some of you are new to the maker movement, we're going to talk a little bit about what the maker movement is. You can kind of see my space there in the corner, and that's actually Erin over at my school. So making is really awesome because it can empower people to make things for themselves. It's all about self-empowerment. It's also a global community that is focused on tinkering and tinkering to learn. And it doesn't have to be a designated corner in your space. A pop-up makerspace is just as important as having a designated corner. Students are allowed to make all over my library. They just happen to come to these tinkering tables the most.
And I think, the maker movement in part is a reaction to the tech-saturated community that we have. And there's a necessity now for kids and adults to know how things work and how to figure out how to build things on their own. I think that we become users and consumers, and the maker movement is about becoming an active producer in our world. I think in the past, too, that, invention was sort of limited to engineers with the proper tools, but now we can build prototypes and with our 3D printers, and digital fabrication has become much more easier for many different types of people.
So we are really excited about the maker movement, and we found that we've had a lot of people kind of asking us questions and asking us how we get ideas for projects. And there are so many resources out there, but we saw that a lot of them were written by engineers and scientists. And since Aaron and I both don't have science backgrounds, we both have art degrees, we kind of noticed that most of the maker resources were written from a strictly science standpoint. So we decided to write a book together that anyone could follow regardless of skill set. And that's why we wrote the big book of Makerspace projects. We set out to make 50 projects with easy instructions that would inspire learners to get creative and problem solve. And in that, we actually have classroom tips for libraries. So why the library? That's kind of one of the questions we get all the time. Why do we have maker activities in the library? And it's because we want to move our patrons, whether they're students or public people, we want to move them from a stance of consumption into a culture of creation. So our patrons are the ones who should be the producers of our world. They're the ones who are making the future.
I think libraries make sense too, because often people follow their own passions when they're looking for stuff to read and when they're looking for information. So it makes logical sense that we would use that structure that's already in place to provide them with a way to follow their passion for invention and to apply the things that they're learning through libraries, through our traditional lending practices, but now allow them to make things.
And we see that making is often problem solving, or involves problem solving or working to find a solution. And so we noticed that if a maker wants to learn to knit, then they'll have to research basic knitting techniques, or will come up with project ideas, or even research what type of tools they want to use. So all making requires the maker to research skills and the best tools for creation. So when you're creating things for yourself, you may not have the proper tools. It makes it a great time to investigate other solutions to make your ideas come to life. So I came up with this thought the other day. They've always been a place where we consume books and create knowledge. When I first got my library at Lamar, I put up 3 big words: ask, think, and create, because I see those as the thing that drives the library. Students come to the library for information. They may come for books, but they also come for information. And so that's why I see the Makerspace as a logical extension of our inquiry-based space.
And I think, libraries, makers have always been improvising ideas. And when you're improvising or you're trying to, think of a new way to solve stuff, there's a lot of evaluation that comes through. And in our libraries, we teach our patrons often to evaluate sources. And I think making allows us a new way to do that. In traditional research, that might be looking at who wrote it. But with making, we have this new set of skills that people need, and I think evaluating sources like YouTube and Instructables and trying to figure out, who's making this and is it something that I can create. So there's also an evaluation of, your own skill set as a maker that is, happening in our libraries.
And that gives our students actual needed research skills that they use in their daily lives, so something beyond the academic research. We also find that the library is the one place that students can access at any point in the day. So this democratizes our tools by making them available throughout the school day or work day if you're a public library.
And again, you know, the infrastructure for public libraries and school libraries is already there. It exists in the United States, and we tend to lend items. So I think it just is a logical extension that we become a place that creates things, and you know, a place that you can lend tools and lend skills and provide a place to, you know, actually store people who can teach those skills.
So why wouldn't we extend that place into a place where people feel comfortable creating things?
So a lot of us have, you know, people who are interested in authentic, you know, life research, and it's different from academic research. And I realized this when I was working with a group of students, and I thought, well, they're never going to need to write an English paper after this point in their life. They're going to need things that help them deal with real life. And so, you know, things like fixing a dryer. And so if you're teaching a patron, you know, okay, so what is your dryer doing? Let's go look on YouTube. Let's find information about this. And so, you know, when they do that, when they go out to YouTube and they're looking at a video on how to fix a dryer, they have to look at, okay, who posted this? Is it a person who's wearing a uniform? Who do they work for? Is it a company? And then, you know, they have to think about, okay, can I actually perform this repair myself? You know, and is the repair beyond my skill set? So I think that's a really important part of research that we've kind of ignored, that people really need.
So this is all great reasons, but how do we start? How are you going to start at your school or at a public library or in an academic setting? The first thing I have to say is don't be afraid. Making is highly engaging for students and makers and adults once they get over the hurdle of having to do something themselves with their own hands. We inherently play to learn. It's only as we age that we fall out of practice. So don't worry, you can get back into making and tinkering. Everyone is a beginner at something in the maker world, and that's why it's a very welcoming community. So one thing you need to do is create some outreach by directly collaborating with families or schools or your community to see what your community wants before you start buying tools and creating programming. You need to communicate, collaborate, and cooperate to build that universal access. Erin and I were lucky to go to DC this summer for the Capital Maker Fair, and we heard Sherry Lassiter, the director of Fab Foundation, say this quote, and we really were moved by how everyone at that talk really focused on community. It's our community that really drives our makerspace. So make sure you work with students and patrons when integrating maker programming, because they're the ones who are going to be coming to your programming, so you need to make sure you talk to them.
And I think when you talk to a community or community members, one thing you have to ask them is what do they value? And along with that, what projects do they want to create? Because I think it's something that will vary greatly depending on the community that your library is in.
So last year, or not last year, 2 years ago, I was in an affluent school where students were drenched in technology. We were a one-to-one school. Every kid had an iPad. And now I'm at a low-income school where most of my students have free and reduced lunch and do not have internet at home. And I find that the activities that my students make are very different. So they enjoy different types of activities. My affluent students love being drenched in Bluetooth robots and green screens, whereas my students now, they didn't really understand how to use a green screen until I showed them this last week. So they enjoy building things with their hands and blending high-low tech activities like sewing circuits or learning to solder and even mixing music. So another thing I found about my low-income students is they really enjoy making things that they can give to others. So they'll often 3D print something and then say, I made this for my mother, or I made this for my friend. They don't really make things for themselves. They're doing it as a selfless act, which I think is pretty cool.
I also, had an experience in the public library where I was going to take my first 3D printing course, and I thought this was really interesting. When you start offering programming, looking at who comes to that programming. I went to this 3D printer course, and I thought it would be, young people, but it turns out it was kind of half and half. It was people like under 25 and we also had a few teens, but there was a lot of retired citizens who had come to this lesson on 3D printing. And then as I was working through the class, I started to talk with them. Some of them turned out to be retired engineers. A lot of them are retired artists who want to use 3D printing in their own artwork and in their own projects they're doing at home. So I think it's interesting to look at, not only what your community wants, but who your community is and who they're made of. It's very important.
I noticed a similar thing when I went to Denver this last summer, and I visited the Boulder Public Library, and they have a makerspace that's kind of getting off the ground called Building 61. And they were in between workshops, and there was a retired gentleman in there using their laser cutter to create these beautiful designs, intricate designs on a wooden cup that he was giving to others, which I thought was really cool. So if you don't have a lot of money and you want to get into getting a lot of stuff, you can always collect clean recyclables that can be changed into new inventions, and I'll talk more about the Invention Literacy Project in a second. And you can also, in schools, integrate into subject areas and teachers' involvements. So we find that there's two big areas of makerspace activities going on. There are workshops where people are guiding learning and maybe introducing a new skill set, or maybe the workshop is just exploring materials. And we also see free-range maker spaces, and that's where students can do whatever they want, and that's a great way to have your maker space. So we're kind of a little hybrid of both, because right now you have to build a culture of creativity before the free-range making is really going to take off at your library.
Right, like a lot of my students don't automatically come to my library knowing how an Arduino works or how little bits work. So there's you have to provide opportunities to give them a chance to learn how to use those types of items. And workshops do that.
Yeah, workshops can actually be really important for our low socioeconomic students in our schools and our communities. They give our kids job skills and engagements and activities at school and give them something they can look forward to in the school day. So last year I had like a soldering workshop, and my students were learning to solder, and one of them immediately asked me, "Miss, what job can I get with this skill?" Right? So sometimes also they just need a purpose for learning the skill. I kept trying to get my kids involved with paper circuits last year, and they really weren't that excited about it until I held a workshop called Paper Circuits for Mom, where they built paper circuit cards for their mother.
So one of my favorite quotes from Twitter is that someone at the Tinkering Studio tweeted that, "I rediscovered that learning is more important than knowledge. It's not just about test scores. It's about creating students who intrinsically want to learn."
So we're making kids who want to learn, which is kind of an amazing thing at school. We see our students coming to create and to learn, even though they're at school, where a lot of times they are avoiding work. So I think that's kind of an interesting irony.
Yeah, I think about your student who was learning programming last year, and he was so excited about it. It was something that he wanted to get a job over the summer so he could get a laptop so he could program over the summer. And I think that's amazing that imagine if kids were like, "Oh, I want to do math over the summer." I mean, that's something that I don't know. I think this is an amazing opportunity for school libraries.
So how do you develop project ideas? Like we said, communicate with patrons and always have them in mind.
I think also, with your community, looking at the materials that are available and what your school or community really focuses on. Like we live in Denton, where we have UNT, we have major music schools. All of our schools love music. My high school in particular, it has a great music program. And so we've done projects where the kids are making guitars, and I think that is something that even at the collegiate level, it comes across. Kids would be totally excited. It makes sense for you to do things that your community is going to love, and I think that's one of those projects that we did in the book that it's a really cool opportunity to share that
You can search Twitter lists, you can visit maker fairs, and one thing that we love doing is going to science museums because science museums do a great job of creating participatory centers. So they have really, like if you go to the Fort Worth Science Museum or you go to the Perot Museum in Dallas, and I'm sure you have local science museums that are the same, you walk in and they have something that's kind of half done for you to work on and create. And so they do a great job of knowing that people are only going to be there a short amount of time, so they develop these short little nuggets of amazingness that someone can create in a really short amount of time. So we have some projects like that in our book, and that's our book on the lower left corner, the big book of Makerspace projects. Another great book to get involved in making is Josh Berker's Invent to Learn Guide to Fun. And one of our favorite resources is The Art of Tinkering. It has lots of really cool, interesting ideas in it. And I'm kind of, I'm blaming Josh Berker now for my obsession with Lego. And so I've been reading these Lego function books by, I'm not sure I can say his last name, Isogawa. And he has the best visual representations of putting together really cool Lego projects. So just ways to teach your kids or your community about mechanisms and gears, and I just ordered his new book about cars and contraptions, and he has one for the Lego Mindstorms as well. So some low-cost ideas that we're really into from our book, coding, we've mentioned a couple of times, but coding is free. You can spend absolutely no money and start coding today. So you can use graphical programming like Scratch, where students are doing drag and drop block coding. If you have iPads or in your library, or you can even some things you can put on your phone, there's an app called Tickle that you can program robots with. And then when you get a little more complicated, Arduino projects are great to learn some self-paced project ideas. If you can also set up a participatory station in your library with Raspberry Pi, where patrons can learn Python programming and kind of see all the things that they can do with that. One thing that we really are into right now are making with recyclables, and I think that's because so many people have said, well, we don't have any money, how can we make this?
Right, where do I start if I don't have anything at all?
How am I going to do this? I don't have any money.
I think the answer is cardboard.
Yes.
Cardboard, popsicle sticks, balloons, and recyclables. And it's one of the things we thought about when we were writing the book. It's, okay, how can we give people projects that are sort of, they can get started and they could make things very cheaply, and not only just make things, but make things that were sort of half-baked, so you have to finish the end of it, or there's something that you have to, personalize or add to this project. It's not just about, doing a singular thing, making one thing. It's something that you can expand and challenge yourself with.
Right, and I think making the project something that people can go further with and kind of make their own is one of the things that's the most important. So we're going to try something really crazy right now, and we're going to do Demco's first ever web thing. We're going to show you us, and we're going to show you how to make a simple robot out of a toothbrush motor. So we have to move my computer. So if you'll give us 1 second, and then you can see my beautiful screen. And that's our lovely daughter, Vivi. The webcam. It's right there, down there.
Right there?
Yeah, I think so. Can you see us now? Oh, here we are. So we had to get our David Letterman style coffee cut going on with water. So to make a brush bot, you can do a really simple brush bot with a toothbrush. And so a lot of people have done the toothbrush, the vibrating phone motor that they put on a toothbrush head, but we're going to go a little bigger than that, and we're actually going to make a scribble bot out of it. So these dollar store toothbrushes inside, let me see if I can get this out of here, have, oh, Aaron, where's the motor? He gave me there's no motor in there. He gave me a toothbrush motor without a motor. We'll have one right here. Luckily, we have lots of weird stuff around. Is it over there?
Well, here's one.
Oh.
I think you broke the motor in half.
I think I broke the motor in half. So inside there is a motor. Oh yeah, I did break the motor in half. I can see it now. That's funny.
Okay.
Well, now we can see the inside of the motor. So this is our motor, and this is probably too small to see, but one of our projects in the book is talking about this this off-balance motor. So if your motor in your toothbrush is not off-balance, you can put a piece of hot glue on the end, like just cut a little hot glue stick and put it on the end. Oh yeah, I have one right here. And this robot. There's just a piece of hot glue on the end of that motor to make it spin a little different, and that just makes it off balance and wiggle. So this is a little painter bot. I was practicing making a robot that I could program with Arduino. So this is a little painter bot that you would dip in paint and then it would scribble. And actually this is the artwork behind Aaron right here. Yes,
oh, sorry.
This is the artwork made from this scribble bot. So once you take the motor out, we actually have kind of modified our motors a little bit so there's a look different. We take an alligator clip and we teach our students how to strip wires because we feel like that's another skill they might like to know. Once you take the motor out, you just attach the battery. You'll see that it comes to life and starts moving on its own. So this is a pretty cool idea that you can take a simple cup. You hold these markers, sir?
Yes.
And where do you want to put them, on the inside or the outside of the?
Put it on the outside.
Okay, so.
Oh, sorry. Leave this on. Go.
So you can play around with your placement of markers, and you can play around with your placement of your motor and your battery pack. 74? All right, we're going to go 4. Okay. And to play with the placement of the battery pack and the motor, I like to do a roll of tape and just stick it on the bottom of the battery pack. And we'll place that inside our cup to kind of help with our wires. All right, and then, ooh, that roll of tape did not want to stay. I may have to not do a roll of tape.
It's very humid here today, so.
Did we mention we live in Texas? Okay. So I hid that down inside there, and Aaron, if you'll set it on the thing. We've got our motor. We're going to place it on the end of the cup. And another interesting thing that you'll learn about motors is they don't have a polarity, so it doesn't matter if you wire it the wrong way, it's not going to be wrong. Actually what happens is it changes the direction of the motor the way you hook it up. So I'm going to hook it up, and right now it's moving really slow and not doing a great job apart. So I'm going to try moving my motor. I actually move my battery to the top. To the side a little bit. If your motor isn't pressed on hard enough, then the cup won't get the vibration, and that'll also affect your motor. There we go. That's going much faster. So this is just a great activity. You're probably kind of loud to talk through this. A great activity for patrons to problem solve and experiment and learn. Oh, that looks so weird on the, yeah. To experiment and learn with different, with a different way of kind of a concept of thinking.
And your motor will look a lot like this. You'll see 2 tabs at the top, and that's what we're connecting to, just so everybody sees it.
I like how you put the motor over my face.
Sorry.
Another thing in our book that we really enjoy are paper circuits. And so this is a simple paper circuit made with Chibitronics. And I haven't put the battery in yet, but when all you need is copper tape, coin cell batteries, and LEDs. We use Chibi stickers because we just love G and Chibitronics because they're awesome. So some people have said that they think those are too pricey for their library. So you can always use regular LED with our project templates. It won't change a thing. So once I place the battery in, And paper circuits are finicky, just so you know. Ooh, this is one of those things where it worked. I'm going to just hold it because it's being crazy. So once you place the battery in, you can see that the LED lights up. I'm going to have one of those kind of days today. Yeah, so sometimes you have to run your finger along the tape. There it goes. Now it's happy. But you guys can't see what I'm doing. It's like a secret science experiment. You can't see what we're doing.
Behind the curtain.
The magic behind the curtain. So there, the LED is lit up. I keep losing my, I'm not doing a great job of clipping. It's apparently very hard to talk and correct paper circuits. So there's the LED lit up. And so what it does is it lights up this little birthday candle, which is really adorable. Erin did these illustrations. What we like is the idea of having our students learn the concept and then creating their own art. And so we kind of force them into being more creative in an artistic way.
Right, and your science teachers and parents that are into science, they're going to love this kind of stuff because you're teaching them about circuits and switches. It's great, and it's a fun way to do it. And the kids really get into, after they figured out how to do it on your example, they really get into making their own. It's very, very fun.
So this is one where we're teaching them how to make a switch, so it doesn't come on until you press on the flashlight. So that's a pretty cool project for students too. I'm like looking to make sure it's working. So those are with Chibitronics, the Chibi LED stickers, but you could also get regular LEDs. This is a great kit. One reason I really love Chibitronics is because as a company, they're focused on getting more people involved in making. So all their tutorials are online for free because they just want us to make stuff.
And they have that great notebook.
Yeah, so that's the notebook that's inside this starter kit is actually like available for free online. Another thing that's really great to do is take your recyclables and hack them with little bits or with Makey. So here is just a really simple circuit with little bits where it pulses an LED light. And then this is just a jar I've covered in Mod Podge. This was another project I was working on. So you can see when it flashes, so it's hard to see on there, but when it flashes, it's actually saying help. It's because I was obsessed with Stranger Things and the weird LED things that were kind of going on. Stranger Things seem to have a lot to do with electricity. So I kind of made this inspired by Stranger Things. Oh, I just need to pull this back. Maybe you can read it better. So that's just making things with just a simple jar, some Mod Podge, and the tissue paper, and then using the LEDs and electronics to kind of make kind of literacy and storytelling and go a little further with your concepts. Another great way to do that is to take Makey and hack recyclables with it, and you can make all kinds of interesting stories with Scratch and then control them through the use of this little controller.
With Makey, I found that teaching kids about switches and how to make switches, and we do a lot of projects in the book that actually teach you how to make switches for Makey, and it really helps the kids kind of think through what they're going to design a little bit and how they're going to trigger the keys on their computer.
Right, so last year we both put our book drops. We made Makey book drops, and the sound goes off when you put a book in, and so that's kind of like one of the things to inspire them to get started thinking on how they can use that. So we're going to go back to our slideshow. What does it say? Oh no, are we not big enough? Oh, she said that to everybody. Okay, well I hope you guys could see that since we kind of went crazy and did our what do you call it? our live broadcast. So we're back to looking at this. Oh, we have this really great smartphone chapter in the book too that kind of, since a lot of kids and a lot of adults have smartphones, we have some projects in there that will hopefully get them inspired to go a little further. So Aaron has one where he's doing like a Pepper's Ghost hologram, and what we're really hoping from that is that people go further and make their own videos. Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of the projects with smartphones, they're kind of easy and sort of simple to make the project that's in the book, but really the best thing about the project is that there's so much other opportunity to go way further with that. Just because you make a hologram with a smartphone doesn't mean that and you use somebody else's video doesn't mean that you can also make your own videos. And that's where some of the projects kind of lead you into a different type of making other than the original project that they started with.
And then we kind of feel the same about our simple robots we went to earlier there, but our simple robot that we made here, we've been making all kinds of different versions of this drawing robot. So I made one with pencils where I chopped them in half and glued them on a popsicle stick. And my students have been working on that. Tomorrow I'm going to have a whole Scribblebot Mania with my students where we just see what kind of materials we can use, because Aaron and I did a workshop last week and he took a video. What did they have their Scribblebot on?
They used a paper clip and just a piece of tape and a pen, and that was it.
Right. So they made a Scribblebot that drew with a binder clip.
Yeah.
And that was pretty cool. So there's endless ways that you can reuse that little motor to do all kinds of interesting scientific experiments. Another thing that we've been talking a lot about was this guitar. I guess Aaron can play it. We have it. Should we go back to the web view, or I don't know if that web view was good enough for you guys. We'll try one more web view because Aaron's gonna have to play this though, not me.
I don't really have anything to play with.
He doesn't have anything to play. We can play with the ruler. Yeah, let's play with this. So this is a project we did last year with our students where we used recycled boxes, and then all that we had to buy were guitar strings, and then the other things we actually got donated from Home Depot.
Yeah, Home Depot was awesome.
This one even has a pickup, Spark Fun donated pickups. So this little cardboard guitar is actually electric. And I meant to bring my pig nose amp so that we could play it.
We could really disturb them. So sorry, I don't have my slide with me. It's the reason I
is so cheesy.
don't teach music.
Let's get off the webcam. So the reason that we really like this guitar workshop was that it helped our students see everyday materials in a new way. It also was really interesting for my kids because I don't think most of them were going to be able to go out and buy a guitar, and they weren't necessarily all musical students that went and made them. So I had these kids basically living in my library for about 2 weeks, building the guitar, and then bringing them back in to show everyone else their guitar. So it really gives them creative confidence and enable them to try out something they hadn't tried before.
And I think, you're seeing one version of it here, but just the variety that we saw, because every box that we used was different, and it just made some incredible looking instruments that all sounded differently and all had unique little quirky things about them. They were just really cool.
I think what else was funny is the types of items kids would begin to play the guitar with. So we made guitar. One of them wanted to 3D print a guitar pick, which I told them that was silly. And another student said, why don't you just cut a gift card up to make a guitar pick? So they start seeing these everyday things in brand new ways that gets them moving into that creative culture. So there you can see our smartphone hologram that we were talking about. I think that making the videos for these is like kind of a really complicated task that I'd like to see our kids kind of move towards.
Right. It's just one of those simple things to make. It doesn't take very long, but actually making the video, constructing the video, and looking at how those images go together to make that illusion is a very kind of complicated task. It's really amazing to see kids go through that.
And then down here in the lower corner is our Makey Makey. This is kind of one of my favorite projects in the book that's with Makey Makey, and it's the MIDI. If you guys are into music at all, Aaron, can you explain what a MIDI is to people? Oh, I probably shouldn't have done this on the spot. Don't Google it.
Sort of a way to trigger other sound. I mean, it's just
it's a sound
device.
controller.
Yeah, it's a controller.
Right. So some people have really expensive MIDIs. Like these are things that we bought some for the library where it's basically you can program sounds on these buttons. And so if you're into DJs or I guess electronic music, you'll see these people playing these MIDI controllers. And there's actually a great video out there of a guy playing. He made a MIDI out of fruit.
Right, the Mickey Mickey.
Yeah, he made a MIDI with eggplants and bananas and kiwis, and that DJ was amazing. So I made a MIDI paper circuit. Oh, I had it here, and then I don't have it here. So I have a MIDI paper circuit here in this lower picture. So that the only thing that costs money is the Makey, and then you're able to inspire creativity with music and sound, and also with paper in that project. So I think that's really cool. And actually, before I moved to Makerspace Mashup Fund, our invention literacy project, which you can find on my blog, really deals with using that idea of looking at everyday things and putting them in a new light. And I really learned that from playing with Makey so much, and probably watching Jay's video every time I show it to my students, where he talks about how, you know, we can invent with anything. That's why they made the Makeys, because you can invent with just about anything, anything that's somewhat conducted. So our invention literacy project that I partnered with April Ferranda, one of my freshman English teachers, was just based on the concept of getting kids to research an invention and then creating their own invention. And they use Makey in these little bits, and some of them just use random stuff. So if you have time, I would go out and look at that project, because I think anybody could do that project. It really helped me realize that with clean recyclables, you can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we throw away or recycle tons of stuff.
Right. So here is some Makerspace Mashup Fun designed with Aaron, where he made a Little Bits windmill, basically out of cardboard, and then you have the little bits that activate it. So once you get your culture of creativity going, you can start mashing up your materials. So this is another project in the book where we combine little bits and Sphero and coding to create the ultimate smart obstacle course.
Yes, with classic obstacles.
Classic putt-putt obstacles, mini golf obstacles.
Yeah.
So like the servo arm and the classic windmill.
Yes.
And then, of course, we had to use Makey to trigger a photo finish.
Yes.
And so the Tickle app on iPad, it's unfortunately only available for Apple, is really cool because you can put all your robots together. So no matter pretty much any Bluetooth robot you have, you're able to control with that Tickle app. Even the Lego We Do now at this point.
Right. I think there are even drones on that app.
There are drones on
Yeah.
it? Oh yeah, there are drones on it, and there are light bulbs on
The
it.
rolling spider.
You can control the Philips Hue light bulb.
Yeah.
So pretty cool stuff. Okay, so the key is having these open-ended projects and always thinking about the relevancy for students and the relevancy for the library. So a lot of the ideas that we come up with really start with kids. The kids come up with the idea. They say something they want to make, and then we find a way to create that thing. So once you've grounded that culture of creativity in your library, you'll be able to take things further and do some of these more complicated things that we have. But I think one of the most important things is that for any makerspace, it needs to have a little bit of something for everyone so that it's inclusive. And we don't show any of the pictures of my my sound booth and stuff that I got last year, but just by, that's what Aaron was talking about earlier, just by having the MIDIs and have a guitar and I have a keyboard, and I have just a program called Fruity Loops and Ableton Live, and because I had those software in that space available, the student that Aaron was talking about, that he was so into programming music that at the end of the summer, we said, what are you going to do now that you don't have the library? It's like, I'm going to go out and get a job so I can buy a laptop. And the first day of school, he came and showed me his laptop. That was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So combine all of the awesome stuff that you get with robots and coding and Raspberry Pi, and pretty soon at that point your makers will become self-sufficient in their project ideas, and you won't have to host workshops quite as often as you have before.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that in a school or in a public library setting, your makers are going to change. You're going to have people that really know the materials and the tools that are available to them, but you're also going to have people that come in that are brand new. So thinking about, setting up regular workshops and ways to sort of help those newcomers learn about making is really an important part of this.
Right. So last year I did a Scribblebot activity with my students, and I wasn't really planning on doing it this year until I noticed that they were all kept like messing around with the Scribblebots that I had out in our creative maker display that I have up. So now tomorrow I'm going to have one for all the new students that didn't get to experience that workshop last year. And I think one of the other important things that everyone learns is that making is not ever finished, and it's actually not the finished project or product that's important. It's the learning that occurs along the way and the process that really we have to focus on. So some projects can be tweaked forever. I had a student last year, a couple of students working on a Scratch project that was quite extensive that I'm not sure they ever finished.
Yeah, and I think, if you consider how artists work with different themes over time, like P.A. Mondrian, for example, his early work deals with trees and the space around them, and then later he sort of abstracts that, but he paints them over and over and over again. And a lot of times you'll have students who make things over and over again, or they make slightly different versions of that with improvements, and that's a cool progress to see.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of time left over. I know that Liz had a couple questions she wanted to ask and have us cover, I believe, so if she's going to come back on.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Erin. It does look like we have time for a couple questions. We have quite a few. We'll try to get to some of them, and then the rest will be available with the rest of the resources about a week after. The Q&A will be emailed to you next week if we don't get to your question today. So our first question for our presenters is a little bit about understanding your patrons and your community. They're wondering if do you have a survey that you use to find out what sort of activities would be successful with your students? So basically, what strategies do you have to find out what their interests are?
For me, personally, I kind of just am in that corner every morning talking with my kids and using that as a method. But we're working on our second book right now with Dana Rendita, and I think that we've outlined, and mostly Diana's outlined, some really great surveys in that book.
Yeah, I think surveys are important, and if you have a core group of kids that you're seeing over and over again who are really interested in making stuff, you can set up an advisory committee, or set up a time to meet. Let's talk about what we're going to make this year and where we want to go and what we want to learn.
Yeah, I had an advisory committee, or a teen advisory board is what I called it, at Lamar, and I'm forming one for this school year. It's really for the whole library. It's not just focused on maker-centric activities, but I do like to talk with them about that. And one thing that I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this year, that a lot of our readers are makers. So kids that are really into reading can really be into making. And some of them that's not true. Some of them are just into making and not into reading their books. But I have like the Circuit Girls at Lamar was a girl-focused group that was also my Read and Eat Wednesday group. So they were really into just being in the library all the time. So some of them became makers, I guess, because it's just part of the culture of our library.
And I think your budget's going to dictate some of that. I mean, what you're going to be able to make if you don't have money. I mean, you have to, you've got to start somewhere.
It's actually the Global Cardboard Challenge right now.
Right.
So that's a good activity for everybody.
Start collecting cardboard.
Yeah. And then once you start kind of get your core group of makers, you can start asking them ideas of what they want to do, or they'll tell you, because I have I have a kid right now who's really bugging me to have a yearly Sphero driving contest. So.
Okay, great. And that kind of leads into our next question. How do you handle expenses? For instance, if you have people make paper circuit cards, do you have users pay for it, or does your library pay for it, or your school?
We never have users pay for anything, but that's because we're a school library and we're both working at low-income schools. Even our 3D printing filament is free.
It's donated.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of grant writing. And I think there are companies, even local companies like Home Depot, that you can go to and ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. That's the thing. Like, you can ask, and the worst they can do is say no. But you might end up leaving with, you know, 20 or 30 bucks of stuff.
Right. So our guitar workshop materials were all funded by Home Depot and Spark Fund because we asked. So Home Depot, we just went up there and asked them what we could do to get a donation, and I emailed Spark Fund about getting the piezo, which is the audio pickup thing, donated. I've written tons, well, I wouldn't say tons, I've written about 5 or 6 donors choose grants to strictly fund my Makerspace materials. So only at Ryan have I bought materials, and I didn't buy them with the library budget. Still, I had my principal bought them with leftover technology money. So one thing I always tell, this is probably only school appropriate, but maybe this happens in public libraries too, I'm not sure. Aaron actually gave me this tip, to always have a wish list of things you want. And then if your principal says, oh, I have this money that I have to spend like tomorrow.
Spend it.
Then do you have ideas of what you want? Yes, I have ideas of what I want. Please buy me this. Another thing that, what was I thinking about the donors choose and the grants?
Oh, well, like you could look in your community too, because school districts often have their own set of grants, and so if you're at a school library, look into that. Look for organizations in your community that might be interested in, you know, funding those type of projects, especially if, you know, you're doing some project that has to do with engineering. Look to see if there's some sort of engineering club or, you know, some company that might be willing to sponsor you.
I mean, there's actually a lot of funding out there from the IMLS and the government. So that's Institute of Museum of Library Services, and that's for any library. They have a lot of great funding around maker activities that you could get in on. And then, like what we were saying about Donors Choose, is what's weird about a lot of my Donors Choose grants is that they've been funded by companies like out of nowhere. So my sound booth equipment was pretty much all covered by Microsoft employees. Because I have a friend who works at Microsoft, she sent an email out to the other employees at Microsoft, and since it was a tech saturated list of supplies, they thought it was really cool and wanted to donate, and then Microsoft matched those donations, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and Infosys did pretty much the same
Yeah,
thing for
Infosys
me for a 3D printer. That was amazing.
Yeah. So look at those Donors Choose grants and look for the matching funds. That's really like where I think why we've been successful.
Yeah, that turns a, you know, $1,000 project into 500, or, you know, it halves the cost if you can manage to get one of those.
Is there another question you want to ask?
Yeah. So you talked about how making is an ongoing process, and you often have students that are working on projects for a long time. And one of our questions are, how do you store projects that are under construction in your Makerspace?
Why are you laughing like that?
Because storing projects is a challenge.
Let us know. No.
Yeah.
I've always had a in progress project shelf, but I think the hard part about having that is that other students will still mess with it. So I think having clear signage about what that is and maybe teaching them about that spot for a school library. I'm not sure how a public library would go about that. They may want to lock it up until that person comes back. But I have kids that work on Lego projects, leave them on the project shelf, and the next day come back and finish it. So, but like even I took apart a kid's project on the Lego shelf because if it's been there too long, then that material is not getting used, and so I'll take those and redistribute the materials. But
yeah, there's sort of a fine line between displaying it for others to see and then eventually it's been there too long.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have space for that and signage for that that we are hoping will become more effective.
It's like anything that you put a "Don't touch this" sign on. So.
Okay, great. We have a librarian who is taking STEAM projects off-site to several after-school programs, and is wondering if you have any tips for how to work with multiple skill levels.
We do that every time we go on a workshop. So I would say that the key to working with multiple skill levels, at least like when I've gone by myself, it's been really difficult, and so I started bringing Erin with me or someone else with me to help with that. But really, what I told my last workshop participants, they said, well, how do you introduce little bits to people? And I said, what you're doing, this is how I do it. And they said, oh, but what about people who need more help? I said, well, I come and I talk to them like I'm talking to you right now, which I hope wasn't too offensive to.
No, and I think, as an educator, you have to realize that a lot of your students are going to learn different ways. So having multiple ways to give instruction and start with building skills, and that will be definitely a challenge if you're going out to individual schools.
But I think that's one of the keys as a facilitator is walking that fine line of, because you don't want to give instructions or show them directly, because that kind of takes away from the maker movement. Is you can't take over the kids' project and show them how to do it. But it's really asking the right questions and guiding their learning, and then when they need the help, give them help. But I think that's kind of the key to facilitating, is just multiplying yourself into morphing into 3 different people. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, great. It does look like we're out of time for today. We'd like to thank Colleen and Erin for sharing their insights and their knowledge about Makerspace projects and Makerspaces in general, and we hope everyone was able to take away newfound knowledge to support your own initiatives. A recording of the webcast will be available on the Demco Ideas and Inspiration website by next week, and that's ideas.demco.com. So you can review the presentation and share it with your colleagues. And next week you'll be receiving an email that will include the presentation slides, the Q&A log that documents and answers the questions that came in today and any questions we weren't able to get to, as well as a resource list with all the apps and tools our presenters mentioned today. You'll also be receiving a survey at the end of the webinar to let us know how we did. And please take a few minutes to give us your feedback and thoughts on future webinar topics. And we also hope you'll join us for our upcoming webinar on October 27th, when teacher librarian and Makerspace expert Laura Fleming will be talking about how to choose the best products for your Makerspace. And you can register now for that at ideas.demco.com. Again, thank you for joining us today, and have a wonderful afternoon.